Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky all up in your podcast. It's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for pressing play. As always, have a very cool show lined up this week. We have a returning guest who was on a little over 3 years ago. In fact, I recently went back and listened to the episode that he was on, and it was entertaining, and I'm definitely glad to have him back. He's also one of the people I always like to bump into at North Texas RPG Con, so that's always good. But welcome back to the show would be William, aka Bill Meinhardt, who in December 2019, we had him on the show and talked about that he's the world record holder or the record holder. I don't know the exact. I don't know if it's like a Guinness record, but for the largest fantasy RPG tabletop RPG materials collection out there. And he's also a three-time Strat-O-Matic Baseball champion, which is more of what we're going to focus on today, which is Strat-O-Matic Baseball. The more I research Strat-O-Matic, the more I kind of get it to see how big Strat-O-Matic is. It's a big phenomenon out there, and I never realized how big it was. So the last couple of times I saw Bill at North Texas RPG Con, I was like, hey, do you want to come on and talk about Strat-O-Matic? And he said, sure. So we finally made it happen, and I appreciate it very much. So welcome back to the show, Bill.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Shane.
Yeah, you're welcome. So before we get into Strat-O-Matic, which is some people call it, I've actually seen it referenced as the Dungeons & Dragons for the Rotisserie baseball set. I've actually seen a reviewer describe it that way, even though it has nothing to do with Dungeons & Dragons, but it's the mechanics of the game, I suppose. What has been going on with you since the last time we talked? So think about over the past 3 years, because I know your collection was already almost complete, and there were only a few, prized possessions you were out there trying to track down. Have you added anything to your collection that you considered, like sort of a holy grail?
I get things all the time. There are a little over 100 things I'm actually looking for that are published material, but I'm always adding fascinating ephemera from the past. Recently, Paul Stormberg had a Gygax auction for the first time in many years, and I won Gary's one-of-a-kind pewter belt buckle, only one known. And that was a really cool thing to win. And I have other, very hard to find belt buckles, but this being one of one was really neat. So that
does get much more collectible.
Right. That's the kind of thing I've been adding to my collection for the past few years. When you said earlier about, no, I'm not in the Guinness book, but I would say all of the collectors realize that I do have the largest collection.
The largest.
In English, I would like to point out. So they're
right.
Collect foreign editions of things, and they have large collections too. But because I have literally nearly everything, it would be hard for somebody to have more than I do because there's so few things I'm actually looking for. So that's how I would explain it in short. It's a self-proclaimed title, but I have to say it would be universally agreed upon.
You're confident in that title. I've seen pictures of your collection, and it's mind-boggling. And it's your home. Your home is kind of a museum almost. I
viewed it for many years. It's a museum, and I feel like a trust for the community. For many years, I was the only person for the longest time who was actively looking to preserve this stuff for posterity. I had about a 10-year head start on people, so I've always viewed it that way. This wasn't about me. It was about preserving the collected works that were important and I thought might slip through the cracks otherwise. So,
right. That was one of the things that came out when we talked a few years ago was that, it isn't just so that you could say, oh, I've got, like you're not like a dragon sitting on the hoard. You even mentioned that if you get multiples, you'll tend to make sure somebody else gets the multiple copies and you'll keep what you feel is the best representation of it. So you're not trying to hoard. It's about preserving. And I want to qualify it. It's fantasy tabletop materials, fantasy tabletop RPG materials, and you qualified it further in English.
Yes.
But it's still magnificently magnificent in scope. It's quite the collection. So
it's about 15,000 items now.
Yeah, that's amazing. So one thing that occurred to me as I was listening to our previous discussion, how do you know what the complete list of stuff out there is? Like, is it just a good guess, or?
Sure. There are things that pop up. My wife asked me when we acquire something, she said, was that on the want list? And the answer is usually yes, but occasionally it's no. I'd never heard of this one before, honey.
Didn't even know it existed. So,
Lawrence Schick, who made Heroic Worlds in 1990, sort of the Bible for RPG collectors. He got almost everything in it, but there are things he didn't know about. And his definition was it had to have actual distribution. So there are things that were made by individuals who, wouldn't have even gotten distribution. But frankly, I'm trying to pick those up too. So
right. Yeah, there's a ton of. I printed 20 of my own and took them to the local con and sold them, kind of right. Stuff out there. I'll tell you one thing. I would be stunned if you didn't have a copy of this, but one of the future shows I have planned with Bill Barsh is I think what's considered the first published D&D module is at Palace of the Vampire Queen or something. Yeah. So I imagine you have a copy of that. So that would be one of the known things to find, right?
Sure. The first copy of it is in a black folder, and it's very hard to find a nice one in the black folder because the black folder is larger than 8.5 by 11. So usually they're all riffled at the top because when people would have them in a group of other things, it would get damaged because the pages inside were 8.5 by 11, but the folder itself that was containing them was larger than that. So it's hard to find one in really nice shape for that reason.
And I'm really about within a minute or two going to move us over to Strat-O-Matic. I just wanted to get an update on your collection. Sure. Nobody thought this stuff was, it was just being printed. Nobody at the time that it first came out, nobody thought to preserve the stuff. Like you said, at 16, you had the foresight to say, we need to preserve this stuff. And then other people have started kind of doing the same thing. But at the time, it was just, like comic books are treated like collectible gold now. But back in the day, kids would fold them up and stick them in their back pocket. And, it was a disposable entertainment. That's how it was considered. So
I tell the story with my good friend Mark Greenberg, my DM of 45 years, that in 1982 at Gen Con, the first copy of Orange B3, the rare module, came up. And I bought the first one ever sold for $46. And giving me a hard time that I had spent $46 on a $5 module. And I was explaining to him that, this has never been released. It got recalled, landfill, all the rest of it. And he still was giving me a hard time about it. But, now one recently sold for $13,000 as an example. So it's,
I can't even think $5 compared to $13,000. I can't even imagine. I'm having a hard time calculating what percentage increase that is. That's a orders of magnitude. That's really tremendous. So, and you had the foresight, and you mentioned the last time we talked that other people started having the foresight as well, but you were as young as 16 whenever you started buying this stuff, and you were like, wow, this is really worth a lot more than what I'm paying. And you said, prices finally started catching up, decades down the road. Well, I think it's cool that you're out there doing that, and, the reasons you're doing it, and you make it available, like you made it available to the Art and Arcana authors to share and that kind of thing. So
they spent about 30 hours at my house taking pictures of stuff for the book. Mm-hmm. For the D&D documentary that Joe was making, we had a film crew come out and take pictures. And I set up module G1, the Steading of the Hill Giant Chief, in my living room in Dwarven Forge. And he has got a great crane shot above it. And he's got, for the documentary, he's going to do a dissolve to the actual module so that people can see that the setup of G1 and Dwarven Forge was exactly mirroring the module. And then he joined us and we played it over the next 2 days, and it was just fabulous.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I keep hearing that, and I always mess up his last name. Is it Manganello?
Yeah, Joe Manganiello.
Yeah, he's a legit D&D fan, RPG fan. So I'm looking forward to checking out that documentary. But anyway, thanks again for doing that. That's cool that you're out there doing that, and I love that as a side benefit, you're getting to have like cool adventures and meeting cool people and stuff like that. That kind of related to it. So, do you get many requests from people to come? I mean, do they feel weird asking to come to your house and see like?
Oh no, I love it when gamers come by. I mean, fantastic, and I've met a lot of great people. From Peter Atkinson to people who are in my great fun retirement job at Games Plus in Mount Prospect, Illinois, one of the best game stores in the country, where I'm their expert treasure hunter. People come into the store and I say, want to come look at the collection, and they're really excited to do it. So
that's nice.
I'm trying to make it more visible so people know that somebody was doing this. Somebody was trying to preserve the history of the stuff.
Right. So when you say that, we were joking around before we started recording that at what's the name of it's in Mount Prospect, Illinois, but what's the name of the game store again?
Games Plus.
Games Plus. So you said you're their expert treasure hunter. So did the owner, your friend, did he roll out this long contract talking about, funeral expenses and in the event of a dragon and all of that?
Not quite, but it's a great reference you make.
Yeah, that's great. So, all right, well, thanks for the update on the tabletop RPG collecting. Let's move over to the topic of this episode. As I mentioned, a few minutes ago, is Strat-O-Matic. Strat-O-Matic. We're going to focus on baseball, but Strat-O-Matic has a wide range of baseball, football, hockey, basketball. They've got tabletop versions. They've got computer game, electronic versions, computer versions. Mm-hmm. But tell us, as a long time, I think you said since you were 8 years old, you've been playing Strat-O-Matic baseball, and you've been a 3-time champion of Strat-O-Matic baseball. What is Strat-O-Matic baseball?
Well, it's a recreation of real life, how players performed in real life, simulated on cards, where one can, for many years, one had to roll dice to get the results, but of course they made it into a computer game as well. And it simulates how the players actually performed. So their ratio of singles, doubles, triples, homers, walks, strikeouts, stolen bases, etc., are all replicated on the cards, so that when one plays the game, when one plays a 9-inning, 27-out game, it's not rotisserie baseball. One is not getting points. One is actually playing the game. Kirby Puckett will come up against Roger Clemens and will roll a 1-8, and that means it's in the one column on his card, and the other two dice are totaling up to 8, and the result is a single. So Kirby has hit a single, and the next batter comes up. So it is a batter-to-batter recreation of baseball, as opposed to, I'm differentiating it from rotisserie, where one gets points, and whoever gets the most points wins their rotisserie league. Real baseball is how I would put it.
Well, and fantasy baseball or / rotisserie baseball, which, by the way, do you know the trivia on why it's called rotisserie baseball?
Because it was at La Rotisserie in New York City.
Right. It was at a restaurant it was in the first meeting where they kind of invented it, was at, the rotisserie restaurant. So, of course you would know that. But that was news to me. And I love to dangle trivia like that out during the show. Yeah. So is, fantasy football, fantasy baseball or whatever. A lot of it is like, as the real players play the games, depending on how they perform in the real game, you get points and stuff like that, right? So if you choose, my fantasy baseball team is made up of these real world players, and then as the games play out over the season, how they perform in the games, you get points for, if I understand correctly. Whereas with Strat-O-Matic, you're literally simulating a game. Like, you're simulating how the players are doing, and you're in the position of a manager.
Yes.
Which some people might think of that as the baseball coach, but you're the manager. You're setting the batting order. You're, if you're in a competition, you're picking the players for your team and all of that. And then the attributes, say imagine, and this is a very loose analogy because Strat-O-Matic Baseball is not tabletop role-playing games, and tabletop role-playing games is not Strat-O-Matic Baseball. But in a loose analogy, each player has a card which is kind of like their character sheet, and there are tables and whatnot, or statistics on that, depending on how well you roll the dice is how well they perform. And then you're actually playing the game out. So how long does it take to play a game? Like if you I want to play a whole game of baseball, how long does it take in Strat-O-Matic?
Usually about 30 minutes. But if you're playing with a card set that you're familiar with, like people do one of two things usually. They either recreate whole seasons. So their favorite team will be the Atlanta Braves. They will buy the card sets so that they can manage the Braves, and they will manage all the opponent's teams as well, or a friend of theirs will manage all the opponent's teams. Or people will recreate a whole league. They'll get 16 people together and they will play, the American League schedule, or they'll play the National League schedule. And then the other thing people can do are they play tournaments, which you just referenced. So if people are playing the tournaments, the tournaments that I used to play in all the time, if let's say there were 40 people at a tournament, we'd be divided into 4 groups of 10. And within that 10-man group, we would roll a 20-sided die and randomly determine who was picking first and who was picking 10th. And then the draft would serpentine. So 1 to 10 would be selected, and then the person who's picking 10th would get the first pick in the second round. So the draft would snake around, unlike, for instance, baseball or NFL draft. In the tournaments, it's 1st to 10 and then back 10 to 1, so that it is even with who... It's more even with who people are getting to select. There's not a huge advantage to getting to pick first as opposed to 10th. That's the thing.
But each of these, best I could tell from what I was looking at all the Strat-O-Matic information out there, if you're playing Strat-O-Matic in 2023, the most recent set of player cards is from the 2022 season.
That's
right. It's always kind of because they have to wait for the season to end so they can crunch all the numbers and put the cards out for the players.
In March of 24, the cards based upon the 23 season will be available. You asked me a question, and I had a run-on sentence. If you're really familiar, if you're doing a replay of the 1984 season, say, and you get really familiar with the cards, you can play a game of Strat-O-Matic in about 8 minutes because you know the result. You know that a 1-8 for Dale Murphy is a triple 1 to 2, single 3 to 20, and you roll a 20-sided die to determine whether it's a triple or a single. And so you can just roll the dice and have people have the cards memorized. So it can happen much more quickly if you wanted to.
So give people kind of an overview of how long Strat-O-Matic's been around and kind of the scope of it. And I have to say that my initial impression of Strat-O-Matic, I think it first came out in 61 or 62. I know you were looking for your 62 cards earlier. You found your 64. So you've got cards going back, pretty much to the beginning of the game. But I assumed that, this was a game that was big in the 60s and early 70s, and it's kind of tapered off. But that's not the case. There's a lot of people still out there playing this game. It's not hanging by a thread by any means. In fact, I found multiple articles and interviews where over the past 2 or 3 years, it's made a resurgence or it's gotten even more popular, like tabletop role-playing and board games has. Unfortunately, some of it due to COVID. But there's also just sort of a tabletop renaissance going on right now. And there are people that on opening day, I don't know how many, I found one article where up to 100 people traveled from all over the place, all these different, and they went to the headquarters of Strat-O-Matic on opening day so they could get the new card sets. Yes. And so it's a big deal when these new card sets come out. I found another, and I'll have links if you go to shaneplays.com. There'll be a link to this podcast, and I'll have all the show notes. I'll have articles that I'm pulling stuff from in here. There was a one interview where it was saying that up to 50% at one time, there was a guy writing a book doing some research, and 50% of executives in baseball had a lot of experience with Strat-O-Matic because it can teach you the game. It teaches you, like the strong batting lineup and who to do, this person versus that person and whatever. There's a lot of famous people that have played Strat-O-Matic, just a few. Spike Lee featured it a lot in one of his movies. He's got a movie called Crooklyn, and Strat-O-Matic features in that. Trip Hawkins, who founded Electronic Arts, was a big Strat-O-Matic fan. Evidently, both President Bushes played Strat-O-Matic. A lot of baseball players, a lot like Bob Costas, a lot of your sports announcers and stuff like that. So when most people think of simulating games, they'll think of fantasy football or fantasy baseball, but those aren't true simulations. You're actually simulating. So it's interesting to me that a cultural phenomenon this big, this many people playing, stayed totally off my radar until a few years ago when I started, getting more into the history of D&D, and people started making or attempting to make a link between Strat-O-Matics. Most people know that wargaming influenced tabletop role-playing games heavily, but there's also some scholarship that they say Strat-O-Matic, will figure somewhat in sort of the mechanical development of tabletop role-playing games. So
John Peterson certainly has commented on Strat-O-Matic,
right?
Historian for our hobby. But what I wanted to say was I remember Lenny Dykstra, after he hit a home run in, I think it was the National League Championship Series in 1986, hit a game-winning homer. And he was quoted at the time as saying, "I haven't hit a game-winning homer since I used to play Strat-O-Matic." So that was the first time I remember Strat-O-Matic being referenced specifically by a player. When the 1981 All-Star Game got canceled, they went out to in the middle of Cleveland's municipal stadium, usually called the Mausoleum, and they had a Strat-O-Matic game there where they played the All-Star Game that had been canceled out using Strat-O-Matic cards. But I think the reason, if I had to guess, that people who are really familiar with baseball are familiar with Strat-O-Matic. So, the executives are all familiar with it. Bill James once mentioned, he said, everybody before they get a GM job should have to play 500 or 1,000 games of Strat-O-Matic baseball to become accustomed to the rhythm of the game and the managerial changes, choices that need to be made in the course of a season. And so how often am I going to be staying on my 5-man rotation? How often, when do I need to rest people? So that was his recommendation. I think it's a great recommendation. If I owned a team, I would have my general managers and managers play a bunch of Strat-O-Matic baseball. But what I was going to say was that I think the reason that the public is not more familiar with it is because it has not made an inroads into stores. Hal Richman, the owner of the game, hasn't made it available so that it's sitting on Kmart and Walgreens and game stores shelves around the country. He's trying to maximize each individual sale by having people come to his front door and buy the game and sell it only through mail order. So I think that it's I think it's a great game, of course, and it doesn't have the exposure amongst the general public for that reason, if I had to guess.
So, and this is a subjective. I mean, I'm just asking you to shoot from the hip. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's good or bad that it doesn't have like Walmart distribution? Do you think that's better for any idea?
I think it would have sold 10 times as many copies, taken a smaller margin, and been willing to get it onto store shelves. But Hal would be upset with me if he hears me say this. But that's my shoot from the hip. I think it was a short.
But it wouldn't have. It doesn't sound like that you think it would have somehow interfered with the "quote unquote" purity of the experience or anything. Okay, all right.
The people who play Strat-O-Matic will continue buying the card sets each new year they come out, until they die. So he has a great built-in audience of probably, if I had to guess, I'd say 50,000 hardcore Strat-O-Matic players who will buy the new cards. And of course, they recreate past season sets. So, but it started in 1960. He had a couple of cards out. In 61, he had a few teams out. 62 was the first full set with every team represented. I'm missing one set, I think. I think I'm missing the 66 set off the top of my head, but I have all the other sets up through current. So
yeah, that sounded like a real strength of the game to me, because a lot of baseball fans are statisticians, like I guess by nature, and they love to, hey, what if so and so from this year was, they love to track all the stats. And you can get, they've even got, I was on the website, they've taken the stats back to the 1800s. They've got like the Negro League stats. I mean, they've even gone, back before Strat-O-Matic first started. But yeah, I found the reference here. It's in a Long Island Weekly article called "Celebs Rolling the Dice for Strat," and it says the numbers game author Alan Schwartz declared that a 2002 poll he took of 50 baseball executives found that exactly half had learned the game in large part by playing Strat-O-Matic as kids. It also mentions Tim Robbins as a player and stuff like that. But so yeah, I was very intrigued to find out that it's still strong out there. That was, I loved when I read the article and stuff about people traveling, like hopping on a plane and traveling to the Strat-O-Matic headquarters to get their sets on opening day and all that. So there's just something. I mean, that speaks to how special Strat-O-Matic is to a lot of players out there, right?
I have a fun story to tell you. I was high school buddies with Rex and Rob Ryan. Rex, the head coach of the Jets, and Bill, Rob, the defensive coordinator for a number of teams. And so we used to play Strat-O-Matic together, did Rex, Rob, and I. And so cut to, I hadn't talked to Rex in 10 years, and I was looking on eBay, and somebody outbid me for some cards. And I saw that it was R. Ryan, and I thought, oh, it couldn't be. But I sent the person a message, and I wanted to see if it was really Rex. So I said, how many home runs did you hit as a senior at Stevenson High School? And, and he answered the question. I said, oh, it really is you, Rex. So we talked. And the funny thing is the New York Times, of all people, tracked me down for an article that they did about Strat-O-Matic and about Rex and talked about it. And so the Times interviewed me for that story.
Wow. Now, how did they know? Do you think it was because you were a championship, or how did they know that you had that connection with Rex and Strat-O-Matic? Any idea?
I think Rex referenced it, and they hunted me down and found me.
So here's one thing I don't get. I don't know if I was going to name the game, I would have called it Stat-O-Matic. Is it Strat-O-Matic, like hitting balls into the stratosphere? Like, where does the strat come from?
Strat was a more common term in the 1950s. So you see a lot of things with strat in front of them. So
okay, yeah, I don't get that. It's got a nice ring to it, Strat-O-Matic, but
if you go back, you'll see stoves were called, strato stoves and things. So it was like the Jetsons. It was supposed to be, the future. So.
Well, right. So it just it evoked that, whatever. All right. So I want to talk to you about your experiences, like being a champion and what that actually meant, like what you had to do to become a champion.
Sure.
And that, but before I get to that, I want to kind of roll back, because a lot of listeners to the show are like D&D folks, and so I just want to spend a couple of minutes highlighting that it's arguable how much the link is there between Strat-O-Matic and tabletop role-playing games directly, but it's interesting. I found more than one article or reviewer referencing Strat-O-Matic as Dungeons and Dragons for baseball players, or for the fantasy baseball set. And that's how they described it. But I think they're talking more about the mechanics of it. Like, you got 6-siders and you got a 20-sider and this and that, and you're referencing all these tables to see what happened. I don't think they were making the case of a link between, Strat-O-Matic directly led to the mechanics of tabletop role-playing game. But I do want to kind of touch on some of the relationship. I found on BoardGameQuest.com the Strat-O-Matic Baseball Review, which was actually really interesting. I thought it was a good review. If I hadn't have already been researching Strat-O-Matic, it probably made me want to learn more. I thought it was a good review, but there's a paragraph in here where the reviewer, let me get his name here real quick, Alex Rosenwald, says there's a prevailing belief that Strat-O-Matic is the Dungeons and Dragons of baseball. And this is definitely an apt analogy, especially if you have any sort of experience playing pre-D20 D&D. Now, you and I know what pre-D20 is versus post-D20 D&D, but I thought it was interesting he made that distinction. Since each roll of the dice can send you hunting through multiple tables that send you to other tables to determine just what the result of the play is. A fly ball to right field may result in an out, but then you must check your right fielder's arm strength compared to your base runner's speed, and then check another table to see about weather effects. Like checking THAC0 tables to hit armor class 0, Strat-O-Matic has a grid to reference for every possible eventuality and situation, giving players as little or as much detail as their gameplay experience. Now, that makes my gamer little heart happy to hear about all these tables. I love that stuff. But I do want to say that if anyone's listening to this and they're like, oh, I want to go check out Strat-O-Matic, there are basic versions and there are advanced versions and there are super advanced versions. So it sounds like you can turn the dial up and down on how crunchy it gets. So don't be scared away by crunch. And again, all these things, go to shaneplays.com, look for the show notes, and you'll find these articles that I'm referring to.
As I said, the John Peterson, who in his Playing at the World does Strat-O-Matic baseball.
Oh yeah, I'm about to hit that and kind of highlight on that. He actually has an interesting Gary Gygax fact in there related to this. So, but I found another article on it's Long Island Weekly. And it said Strat-O-Matic is Dungeons. Oh, did I already mention this? Dungeons and Dragons for the Rotisserie set, right? So people are making that connection. Now, the connection that John Peterson makes, he's going to talk more about the history of the game of role-playing games, and did Strat-O-Matic have any influence on it? On page 369 of Playing at the World, which, like you said, it's the book. If you want to know the history of simulation games and tabletop role-playing games or whatever, look no further. It's a very good book. But he said they were talking about Strat-O-Matic Baseball. Games such as Strat-O-Matic Baseball in 1962 applied the statistical information beloved of all collectors of baseball cards to the simulation of entire fictional seasons of baseball. That's another thing I didn't stress enough. People love baseball cards. So Strat-O-Matic kind of takes the card collecting and adds another step to it, almost like the baseball cards that you get out of bubblegum packs. Now you can play a game with them, right?
The analogy that I would make, that reading The Lord of the Rings when I was a child, when I was 8 years old, and then finding out about Dungeons and Dragons and realizing that I can play Gandalf, I can play Aragorn. And then with baseball, having my baseball card collection. And then my brother-in-law came by and dropped his, saw that I was playing the 1973 season cards that my mom had just bought me, and realizing that, yes, that Pete Rose card that I can look on the back of where he hit 338 in 1973, here's a representation of it where I can have Pete Rose batting for me and as I'm managing him. So that would be the analogy there, the two.
I can see that, because there was a lot of people that played Dungeons and Dragons that made that connection. Oh, I can play out my favorite fantasy books, right? I can be Legolas or a Legolas type character or whatever, or a Gandalf or whatever. But now here's an interesting fact. So he goes in there on page 369. He's talking about the actual mechanics of the simulation, 3d6 for each at bat, et cetera, et cetera. Late 1968, Scott Duncan wrote up a review of the system for IFW's Monthly. I'm not sure what IFW stands for. I'd have to back up.
International Federation of Wargaming.
Wargaming, right. Okay, right. Thank you. So he's making the connection. They're reviewing Strat-O-Matic Baseball in a Wargaming magazine. And then this is interesting. In 1970, Gary Gygax briefly maintained a column on Wargaming for the All Sports Digest, which was the house organ of Strat-O-Matic. So Gary Gygax actually wrote briefly a column, for the Strat-O-Matic company. So I would say that sure, and he goes on to draw the conclusion that surely Gygax knew well the operation of this and other similar sports simulation games. Avalon Hill produced several athletics-themed games themselves. And then the other thing, this book here, Dungeons and Desktops, The History of Computer Role-Playing Games, it's by my friend Matt Barton, Professor Matt Barton. And on the second edition, I was actually co-author. I helped expand the book. But before I ever came along in the first edition, there's a chapter that talks about the history of tabletop role-playing games. So then that can make the jump over to computer role-playing games. And, Matt Barton, he draws a much more direct line from Strat-O-Matic to tabletop role-playing game. So whether there's a direct line in there or not, there's something going on there where people recognize the similarity between Strat-O-Matic play and war games and tabletop role-playing games. So
the action of having percentages and determining things, and dice collectors are very much about when D10s first D20s came into play and started being made specifically in the Bristol Wargaming Company and started making dice for war gamers in 1971, and there was a Japanese company making dice for mathematical uses and so the discussion there about percentage dice being available as opposed to just 6-sided dice being available, because you can get a much more accurate representation using 1 to 100 numbers, which you can do with 20-sided dice. So Strat-O-Matic was having this 1 to 20 breakdown right from the beginning of the game. Now, at the time, they would use a split deck. So it was 20 little pieces of paper that one would cut up, and one would pick the top card off the deck, and the idea was to shuffle the deck on a regular basis so that you could have a 20 come up and then another 20 come up. But of course, they finally introduced a 20-sided die in the early 1980s with their sets instead of that split deck, as they called it. But right from the get-go of Strat-O-Matic, it was using
a D20 randomizer or a 20 randomizer. All right. So, all right, let's back up. You mentioned something I was going to ask about anyway, or talk to you about again, because our previous discussion on the last podcast when we were talking about your collection, we did spend a few minutes talking about your Strat-O-Matic, and you said that at 8 years old, you were introduced to Strat-O-Matic. Now, I'm curious, because we were talking about it's always been sort of a direct sales. How do you think your mom found it to buy it? Did you ask her to buy it for you, or any idea?
She came home with it and said, "Billy, here, I bought something for you." And I was like, "Baseball, cool." And my father had passed away when I was 6, and he was a huge baseball fan. And so I sort of felt I owed it to his memory to throw myself into baseball. So I started collecting baseball cards. And I think she fortunately saw it on a shelf in one of those brief moments when it was available sitting on the shelf.
And got it for you.
And they had it, and I was sitting playing it when my brother-in-law came walking. My brother-in-law was 16 years older than I was. Came walking in the door and saw me sitting there. And what's that, Billy? Strat-O-Matic Baseball. Oh, I used to play that when I was a kid. And he went and he found his 1962 cards for me and gave them to me. And
nice guy.
Yes, and that got me to now. I started understanding who Mickey Mantle and Sandy Koufax and Roberto Clemente were. So, and Henry Aaron. And that year, Henry Aaron set the record for on April 8th, 1974. He broke the record for hitting the 715th homer. And I just had gotten his 1962 Strat-O-Matic card, and it was really cool. And it sent me on the road to becoming a baseball historian, because I had this history in front of me and the ability to recreate these past seasons.
So, are you I've never even asked you this. I would just assume you're a big baseball fan. Are you more into okay? I mean, I guess it's possible that there's people out there that are huge into the statistics and Strat-O-Matic side that, for some reason, don't even follow the game. I don't know, but I guess that's probably not very common.
I've never been people with that.
Yeah, so most people that play Strat-O-Matic they're not just into it for the rolling the dice. They're huge baseball fans. Okay. Well, I'm surprised to learn. I've recently talked with Bill Barsh about Starfleet Battles, and I assumed that everybody that played Starfleet Battles was a huge Star Trek fan. And he goes, "No, that's not. In fact, a lot of people that play Starfleet Battles could care less about Star Trek. They just like the war game aspect of it." So, okay, so you've been playing since you were 8. You're obviously good at it. you went on to do 3 championships. So what does that mean to be a Strat-O-Matic champion? I mean, what did you, when you win a tournament and become a champion or whatever it is, like, what does that mean? Like, what did you actually have to do to get the title champion?
Well, the first year that there were national tournaments that were organized, they were in about a dozen cities around the country. And one had to win one of those tournaments to get an invite into the national championship. And I think there were 11 of us at the first one that was held based upon the 1984 season. And I picked second at that tournament, and I got Dwight Gooden. The number 1 pick was Ryan Sandberg, I remember. And in the second round, I picked Tony Gwynn on the way back. So I got him with the 21st pick overall, as an example, because it serpentined around. So I went 18-2 in the first round. And then in the semifinals, I won 4-3. And then in the finals, I won 4-3. So I was 26-8 overall, but I won the title at that tournament, and that was my first national championship. Strat-O-Matic had they would sanction the tournaments. They don't have an official role. So certainly nobody else is running national tournaments except the group that is now running them. And they've been running them. The same group has been running them since 96, I think, currently. In fact, the national championships are being held right now out in Las Vegas, this year's national championship.
Oh, so they're still doing it in person. They're not trying to just make it all computerized over the internet or anything, which is good. I mean, I like that.
Yeah. They do have online tournaments and people who win the online tournament. Now, I think they were expecting about 60 people at the finals this year. So, and they'll divide that up into approximately 6 groups of 10.
But they had to earn the right to go there. Like, you had a bunch of regionals that fed into this.
At this point, not really. They've done away with that, and pretty much they have the divisional selectors are from amongst the people who've won tournaments. The people who, if they have a group of 60 people, they don't randomly determine the 60 people. 6 people would go and select players to be in their divisions. They refer to it as the papal room. It's kind of like picking a new pope. So those 6 people who have won the most games and tournaments during the course of the year will be the division selectors, and that's how they'll divide up how the 10-man 6-person divisions are.
So, but like, I couldn't just show up in Las Vegas and say, okay, I'm in. I mean, there's some sort of, can you?
Yes. You wouldn't be showing up at the last second, but you could, pay an entry fee a month in advance.
So, and proceed to get trounced, since I've never played a game of Strat-O-Matic. I don't have the statistical library in my head. So, what was the first year that you won your championship?
It was the 1984 cards.
1984, and then you won 2 more. What years were those?
I won based upon the 91 season. So that it actually happened in January of 93, because we played throughout 92 with the 91 cards, because, as you said, it's always a year behind. And the actual finals were held in January of 93 in New Orleans. So I won $10,000 that year for winning the national championship.
Wow. I've never gotten paid that much for gaming, so good for you.
And then I won based upon the 1996 season as well.
And that was the national championship.
Yes. I've won, dozens of regular tournaments, but that was the last time I won the national championship. And I got married in 2005, and I haven't really played in many tournaments since. Last time I think I played was 2009, because I decided I could either, amongst being a husband and a father and having my huge role-playing collection and playing Strat-O-Matic baseball, something had to give, and I didn't have any more mountains to climb with Strat-O-Matic, so I don't play in the tournaments anymore. But I plan to one day. My kids are in high school and in 8th grade, and when they're graduated and whatnot, perhaps I'll go back to rolling some dice with my old friends.
So you won 3 times. Do you feel that you're still kind of known? Is your name known in Strat-O-Matic circles? Would you have any idea if you showed up and people are like, "Oh, that's Meinhardt,"
Oh, sure, people know. Obviously, there are some people who started in the last 14 years who wouldn't bring
Right.
it on site. But they still have a listing of, for instance, who the prior national champions were and things like that, and the highest winning percentage and stuff like that. So I'm on all those lists, of course. So
see, they should make a card for you. They should make a card for national champions, so you get a Strat-O-Matic card with your statistics on it.
I was gonna wear my when you used to win a national championship, you'd get a black shirt and it says Bill Meinhardt.
Is that kind of like the green jacket in the Masters?
Yes.
Yes.
I was going to wear it for the interview, even though it's video or audio only, but spirit of things. But I actually couldn't find it upstairs in my 1 minute of searching, so my Speed Racer shirt instead.
Which is fine. I'm a big Speed Racer fan, so that makes me happy. So
when John Peterson and I did a video explaining the different brown boxes that you could find on YouTube, I was wearing the Speed Racer shirt. I haven't worn it much in the last 10 years, but it was sitting where I thought the Strat-O-Matic shirt was, so I grabbed it real fast.
Well, at the expense of you losing respect for me, I have to say that I was one of the few people that really liked the Wachowski version of Speed Racer, the Speed Racer movie. So it's a magnificent visual feast. But anyway, I know it's not like the original anime. So anyway, so you won those 3 championships. You retired. You say I've climbed Mount Everest 3 times in Strat-O-Matic. Do you play just yourself? Like if you get bored, do you say, hey, I'm going to play a quick game of Strat-O-Matic personally? Do you still play it all?
Oh, sure. And the other thing, of course, is I have a couple of giant, working in the banking industry for 20 years. I have some old safes, and I have my Strat-O-Matic cards in those safes.
In the safes?
The safe. And giant safes in my house. And so I have the cards in there all in bags and team order. And so what I will do is I will just grab one sort of semi-randomly, and I'll grab the 1978 Cleveland Indians, and I will go through them, and I will, make the lineup that I think that they should have used. And, and I will just do that fun kind of projecting that you can do, because that's what Strat-O-Matic is best for. The fact that you could have Larvell Blanks from the 78, Cleveland Indians bat against Bob Gibson of the 68 Cardinals if you want to. That's the best thing about it, is the fact that you have these individual representations of the players within their own season, and you can play season to season if you want to. So a lot of people play all-star leagues where, you'll have Babe Ruth in the same league with Ted Williams, in the same league with Barry Bonds. So people do those all-star mashups as well. So that's Strat-O is the historical nature of it is one of the big appeals.
And one thing that appeals to me, like as just a gamer, I like the fact that you can play it either solo or against other people. I like that. I think that's appealing. So, and I'm by no means trying to get into the value of your collection, but I mean, on a rough idea of like how these older card sets from the 60s or 70s how expensive are they to track down?
I think the last time 62 sets don't come up very often, for instance, but in the condition I have it, it would probably sell for $5,000 if I had to guess.
Oh, wow. That's more than I would have expected. So, okay. So there's some,
a 67 or 68 set might sell for, $800 or $1,000. So I like most things, the prices have gone up in the last few years. Sets from the 70s and 80s are more like $50 or $100. So, many fewer sets were made in the 60s than were made.
So do you still keep up every year, get the new cards?
Yes. As I said, I'm one of their 50,000 people who will buy the new set every year. And I think that's why Hal, he has a comfortable business and a comfortable business model, and he's tried to do online things, and it's been passably successful, but it's not really very user friendly, their computer game. And to be blunt, their online attitude has kind of been, are you sure you bought the cards? Are you sure you have your registration? Really afraid of theft, of people being able to play their online game and not get paid for it. So I think that, unfortunately, because I think it's a great game. I think it's a wonderful game, and I wish more people played it. So, but not listening to my suggestions for his business.
Yeah, it looks like his son's gotten involved with him now in some of the more recent interviews. They were talking about, during COVID, I can't remember isn't it interesting how the 2 or 3 years of COVID are just kind of hazy in my like everybody has a hazy memory of these 2 or 3 years of COVID. But if I remember right, the baseball season was either delayed or canceled outright in one of the years, and they said they saw a massive increase of Strat-O-Matic then, because people were jonesing for baseball, right? So they said they saw a massive increase, and just looking at their website. Of course, they have Strat-O-Matic baseball, football, hockey, basketball. They've also got this Baseball Max thing that they're doing and Baseball 365. So, but it seems like they are staying pretty meat and potatoes with what works for them. Yes. So, have you ever played any of the others? Football, hockey, basketball?
Sure. Yeah. Back in the day when baseball season would come to an end, we'd play Strat-O-Matic football and play Strat-O-Matic basketball. Hockey is kind of a more simplistic game, and they used to have college football way back in the 70s and early 80s, I think, but they got rid of it. But football's a good game. Football is a guessing game. You're guessing pass or you're guessing run as a defense, and you can move your 11 guys around on the board too, and there are different zones and whatnot. So football's fun.
Cool. So that's like your second favorite then, you think?
Yes.
Yeah, is the football. All right. So what baseball I know. I mean, I watch baseball here and there, and my son's been playing the last couple of seasons and stuff like that. But I know that baseball changes its rule. It fiddles with its rules a lot to keep the game interesting or whatever. Like they added like the pitcher clock, and they'll do so. How well does Strat-O-Matic adapt to that? Like, because if I take a card from 2000 or 2020 or whatever, the rules might be different. So how hard is it to get like a true, like I've got Hank Aaron against, like today's big star, because the rules were a little bit different. It could affect the statistics. Yeah.
A little. I mean, this was the year where baseball really decided to make significant tweaks. But one of the benefits of Strat-O-Matic is that the individual year that the cards were made, I guess what I'm trying to say is it normalizes it. So you can play somebody from the year of the pitcher in 1968 and theoretically play that person against somebody from a big home run era of 1995.
So those stats are normalized against what the environment they were playing in.
Well, that's the idea. Now, if you ask me, and you hadn't, what's the worst thing about Strat-O-Matic? And in 1985, they put in clutch hitting, but they still have not put in clutch pitching. And I don't understand why they have not gone down this road, because it would be the way to be able to really replicate somebody's great earned run average within a specific season by putting a clutch pitching component, which is to say, if there were men on base and 2 outs in an inning, a hit that somebody would normally get would turn into an out. And Hal has been pretty adamant that I don't think he's sure clutch pitching exists, but it probably doesn't exist any more than clutch hitting exists. But it's a way within an individual season to replicate somebody's actual.
Well, right. In a game that lives and dies by stats, you want the stats to be as accurate as possible, right? Yeah. So, yeah, and I mean, at its heart, I guess it could be argued that baseball, at its heart, is the pitcher versus the batter, right? So, yeah, I can see that.
And at 50% of the time, it's going to be on the batter card. 50% of the time, it's going to be on the pitcher card. And on that pitcher card, also, that's where the defensive component comes in as well. So about 30% of the pitcher card is made up of defense results, where one has to check and see how good the defender is and will he or not.
So you had been showing me some cards earlier. Do you have an example of, and I know that you only had a little bit of time to grab some sets, so I don't even know how many cards you grabbed. I know you grabbed 64. Do you have an example of like an older card versus a newer card, like to see the changes in designs or anything like that?
Well, in 1971, they added the advanced version. So they had lefty-righty breakdown. So how well somebody performed against left-handed pitchers and right-handed pitchers, and for pitchers, how well they performed against left-handed batters and right-handed batters. In 1985, they added park effects. So somebody batting in Yankee Stadium is going to have a greater chance of hitting a home run if they're a left-handed batter than if they're a right-handed batter. So they added park effects, And they also
well, there's also some. I just learned this recently over the past few years. Some baseball parks are shorter length than others. So some parks are actually easier to hit a home run in because the fence isn't as far out, right?
Sure. And it can adjust their numbers.
Right.
They're on, and it's based upon 1 to 20 again. So
Right.
you're batting in the Kingdom back in 1985. And you get a ballpark home run effect, it's going to be a home run on 1 to 17 and an out on 18 to 20. If you're batting in the Houston Astrodome, it's going to be a home run on a 1 to 2 and an out on 3 through 20. So it can have a very large effect. Like Jose Cruz in his career hit, I'm off the top of my head, 50 homers at home and 130 on the road or something like that. And on the other end, Ernie Banks hit, 360 homers at home and 150 on the road. So the Wrigley Field was a much more homer-friendly park than the Houston Astrodome. So Strat-O-Matic will replicate that. So the idea is if you playing in a league where you're not recreating Jose Cruz batting for the Houston Astros, but you're taking him in a draft league where now you're putting him in a different park, he can have wildly different results because he's playing in a more homer-friendly environment. So, that element is one of the great things about Strat-O-Matic, that with the park effects, you can get a truer sense of how a player really is, as opposed to just how he performed during that actual season.
Yeah, in a game that lives and dies by the statistics, you want that. I mean, I would want that. I would want the park effects and this and that and the other.
The great thing about it is that it recreates the past seasons, and you can play it so quickly. You can play a game in 10 minutes. There's another game that mimics Strat-O-Matic Baseball called Dynasty League Baseball, and it's a great game as well. And the big thing that it has that Strat-O-Matic doesn't is the clutch pitching. But it takes much longer to play a game of Dynasty League than it does to play Strat-O-Matic. So, and Strat-O-Matic has the results right on the cards. You can see, is it a home run? Is it a strikeout? But Dynasty League has more charts to go to figure out what the actual result is. So Strat-O-Matic is very, and the good results like hits and walks and things are in capital letters. So on the card, so
right, it jumps right out at you. Right,
so very visual, very an immediate adrenaline rush. Yes, I hit a home run.
So do you also, just being a baseball fan in general, do you also do like the rotisserie kind of fantasy leagues with friends or anything, or do you stick just to Strat-O-Matic?
It didn't have any appeal to me because I had Strat-O-Matic. I could play and really manage as opposed to just accumulating points over the course of a season. So I understand why the rotisserie folks do it, but I would think that if the rotisserie folks had been familiar with Strat-O-Matic Baseball, they would have played Strat-O-Matic Baseball.
Well, I found some article that implied that Strat-O-Matic led to the development of rotisserie / fantasy base. I've always heard of it as fantasy, but some people refer to it as rotisserie. Let me see if I can find the reference here.
No, the guys who started it at La Rotisserie in 1971, I think it was, they were Strat-O-Matic. It's just that rotisserie is more low impact, I guess. You can just pick your team and not have to do anything else. And so it was popular amongst Wall Street types who are busy 80 hours, 100 hours a week. They could just pick their team and let it go.
Right, and then accumulate points or not. Yeah.
To be good at it, you have to be making roster moves and bringing some people up and putting other people down depending upon real life matchups and things, because you're constantly accumulating points. So, like anything, if you want to put the time in, you can get better at something. But
yeah, the reference I had found here, and this is from that Strat-O-Matic, is Dungeons & Dragons for the rotisserie set. It says rotisserie baseball inventor Daniel Okrent was a major Strat-O-Matic player living in New York City. When he moved out to a small Massachusetts community to write a book, there were no Strat-O-Matic players in town. So in order to keep his fingers on baseball and to follow the game, he developed the fantasy baseball game, or rotisserie, which is why he didn't introduce them to Strat-O-Matic, I don't know, but that's according to this article. So
Dan Okrent went on to write many books about baseball, so he's a baseball author.
So, obviously, I would imagine your 1962 set is a beloved part of your Strat-O-Matic collection, and your Hank Aaron you mentioned. Are there any other highlights that you're just particularly tickled to have, or that you like to play that team? You pull them out more than others out of your safe, or?
Well, I realized early in my life that on base is the single most important statistic in baseball. And so teams that walked a lot, I've always liked more than teams that. So, Al Oliver was not my favorite player because Al Oliver hit the ball hard, but he hit it at people and would never take walks. So I always liked fringe guys who took a lot of walks. So in 1977, Manny Mota hit 395 for the Dodgers. He had 14 singles and 1 homer and 38 at bats. So, of course, he has one of the Strat-O-Matic cards of all time because he hit 395. And Roger Freed was another fringe player who was the 2-time minor league player of the year. But up in the majors, he didn't do anything except in 1977, he hit about 400 in 398, I think, in limited play. And so he has a great Strat-O-Matic card. And so when people play in leagues, sometimes they will play that, the fringe guys only get their actual number of at-bats that they had in the season. But in other leagues, these fringe guys who had 50 or 100 at-bats
can just killing it. Yeah.
Kill it. They look
so the statistical, I would call that in computer programming, we call that an edge case. These guys are edge cases with their statistic. They're almost anomalies. But so if you let them bat as much as you want, then they're going to kill it. Their statistics are going to be way off.
Rex Ryan in that article, he specifically mentioned Roger Freed. He did a callback to Roger Freed. And they, with the New York Times writer, he played a game where, and Rex got to swing with Roger Freed. So.
Oh, fun. Did it surprise you, or were you? Well, first of all, let me ask you. I assume you live near Chicago. Are you a Cubby? Who's your team?
Actually, you know what? I think because the Cubs and Sox were both really bad when I was growing up, I become a baseball historian. So if a team had a whole bunch of players who I liked, who took a lot of walks and played, that on base game, I would become fans of them. But I'm as big a fan of the 06 Cubs and Tinkers, Evers, and Chance and Harry Steinfeld at third, and I could tell you what all their batting averages are and the ERAs of all their pitchers and whatnot, and the 75 Reds. And so I'm not really a Cub or Sox fan. I'm a baseball fan.
If I was going to be a diehard baseball fan, just due to geography, I would probably either be a Rangers or St. Louis Cardinals. Just due to, I could make it to a Rangers game. I could leave my front yard or my driveway and be at the stadium in about 4 or 5 hours. That's about the closest to me. So that was kind of cool to see them, take it last year. So I just didn't. Yeah, that's interesting because people who are passionate about sports usually have a live or die team. So that's interesting that you're more, even-minded about it. So
when you mentioned the Cardinals, of course, were the westernmost baseball team for many, many years. And KMOX broadcasting the Cardinals game, many people west of the Mississippi River became Cardinals fans because of St. Louis's, blowtorch of a radio station. And so for the South and west of the Mississippi, until the Dodgers and Giants moved out in 1958, most of the people west of the Mississippi became Cardinals fans because they could hear Cardinals games and they couldn't hear anybody else on the radio.
Interesting. Well, since you mentioned the Dodgers, that reminds me of another piece of trivia you're probably aware of, but I'll throw it out there for the listeners. The guy who invented, you've mentioned his name several times, but the guy who invented Strat-O-Matic, I think it was Parker Brothers. He went to one of the major game companies and asked for seed money, and they turned him down. And he went to the Dodgers. I don't know what his connection was with the Dodgers, but he went to the Dodgers. They turned him down. So he took a loan with his dad. And his dad said, if you can't pay me back in a year, then you have to give up this dream and come work for me at my insurance company. And luckily he was able to, because he shudders. The article I read is he just shuddered at the thought of having to work in his dad's insurance company. So other important questions asked. These are the vital questions people want to know. So have you ever done the 7th inning stretch or done the chicken dance while playing Strat-O-Matic baseball?
7th inning stretch, yes. The chicken dance.
Yeah, you've never done the chicken dance. Have you ever gotten hungry for a really tasty hot dog while you're playing Strat-O-Matic?
No, I don't think I have. Playing in the tournaments, of course, we play, 16, 20 games in a day, and playing from 8 a.m. until, 1 a.m. the food choices were never really great. So I bringing Fritos and peanuts with me to eat.
Right.
Of course,
to keep going. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, though, man. I appreciate you so much, but I do have to. I always have to end. I don't know if you remember this or not, but I always end the show with the bad joke of the week. And even though the podcast is more monthly now than weekly, bad joke of the week has a good ring to it, so I still call it the bad joke of the week. So, and now there's usually more than one. So, and you already signed the waiver, so I have legal immunity against any psychic damage that happens to you here. So, here we go. I picked out some baseball ones.
Okay.
You probably heard these before, but we'll see. Why does the pitcher raise one leg when he throws the ball?
I don't know, Shane. Why does it?
Well, if he raised them both, he'd fall down. Fall down, see. All right. This one's terrible. This next one's terrible. I almost feel bad for throwing it on you, but I'm going to do it anyway. Where does the baseball player go when he needs to replace his uniform?
I'm not sure. Where does he go, Shane?
New Jersey.
Ah.
You like that one? Yeah, I was hoping you're going to. Maybe this will make you groan. I always hope for a groan. I hope for that kind of, like you said. Yeah, New Jersey. All right. Why did the sausage quit playing baseball?
Why did the sausage quit playing baseball?
Because he was the worst on his team.
Oh, that is.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yes, the grimace on your face. That's what I want. That's what I want. I know I've scored a direct hit when that happens. So, all right, let's end there. Thank you for surviving my bad jokes. Thank you for your time. Look forward to seeing you and talking to you in the future. And I'm seriously, because my son likes to play baseball, I'm seriously thinking about investing in some Strat-O-Matic so him and I can do that together. So
absolutely, you should.
Yeah, I got the website open right here. Maybe I'll go on opening day to the headquarters and get the new set.
Well, you have to go in advance to pick it up. The pre-orders there are available for pickup.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever gone to the?
I have not. No, I have not.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you later. Thanks again, Bill, and enjoy the not quite snowpocalypse that's happening in your area right now. You sounded mildly disappointed in the snowboats.
No, I did shovel for like 2 hours and 45 minutes today, so it's how I get my exercise.
Well, just get a flamethrower. Have you seen the videos of people using flamethrowers to shovel their driveway? They're out there. They're out there. So, all right, man. We'll talk to you later. Thanks again.
Thanks.
And everybody else, we will catch you next time on Shane Plays. Thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays Geek Talk. I certainly hope you enjoyed this journey into the things we love. For your convenience, show notes with helpful links for each episode can always be found at shaneplays.com. You can catch the podcast in several places, including on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, Verbal, YouTube, and more. If you like what you hear and would like to support Shane Plays Geek Talk, you can do so for as little as $1 per episode on Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Stay geeky, my friends.